everyone, I'm Luke Hector and you're watching The Broken Meeple. This is a YouTube channel about board games where I give reviews, top 10s and my honest opinions, regardless of the consequences.
Get on with it.
So with the assistance of Zatu Games, who have sponsored this video, I'm taking a look at Orichalcum. This is not the newest game ever. It came out last year, I believe, but it's been released by Catch Up Games here and by Pandasaurus, I believe, over in the States, and it's had a decent amount of buzz. There's been some very positive reviews for it. It's co-designed with Bruno Kefala as well as Johannes Goupy. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, but I mean, it's Goupy. How would you pronounce it? And it's meant to be a fairly short, fairly simple game with a kind of a, not quite a Civ feel, but the idea of building up your terrain little map and racing to 5 victory points rather than having to score them at the end. It's just get there, immediately win, which is a nice change of pace. Question is, was it actually deserving of all those reviews, or is just this one pretty forgettable? Generally what happens is that you all have your board, and more on these a bit later, but this is where you will build your map tiles. So these tiles come in sizes of 3, 2 and 1, and you'll place them on here and they represent different terrain types. These will enable you to gain control of titans, which are essentially like powerful god characters that can give you a special ability, but also so that you have room to build temples and mine for more Orichalcum, although just call it gold, who the hell calls it Orichalcum, and you know, recruit more hoplites, which are kind of like, both are like currencies in the game that allow you to do stuff. But the crux of the game revolves around an action selection board. So this board will have a bunch of action cards which correspond to multiple things. Firstly, they dictate the size of terrain tile that will go on it. They also have an action that you'll be able to do. And if a volcano happens to turn up on one of the terrain tiles, they may also come with one of these. One of these lovely, delightful monsters to make life a little bit harder for you, because you have to get to 5 victory points and be clear of monsters to win the game. So the monsters can get you a bonus for killing them, but they are a hindrance to you actually winning. You essentially take it in turns to choose one of the action cards from the row, paying a cost if it's further up, and you take the tile, you put it on your board, and resolve any effects of claiming titans if you've put 3 or more of the same terrain type together. But then you also get to do the action, which could be get more hoplites, get more gold, actually fight off the creatures, or construct buildings, of which there are a motley crew of buildings that come in another bag. Whoop, here we go. Nice little buildings here that can either give you more training camps, more mines for hoplites and gold, but also a bunch of buildings with special abilities that can be built on your terrain tiles in order to basically improve your standing. Now, when you finish the round, you reset everything, you put more buildings out, you refresh the card row, and you keep going, rinse, repeat, until somebody gets to that 5 victory point limit. And as soon as that happens, that's it. No scoring, no finished round, no bonus turns. That's why first player markers are pretty important in this game. If you get the 5 VP, you win. Well done. So in terms of components and artwork, you know, they are pretty good. Nothing stellar, but pretty good. These Dixit-sized cards are cool for the action cards because they've got to hold the tiles on there, and they've also got to have creatures on there. So it's nice that everything is there, and all you do is take the card with all the stuff on it, and you get to do your turn. That in itself is pretty cool. The terrain tiles themselves have got nicer artwork on them. They're pretty colourful and they're sturdy enough. You know, not the thickest cardboard in the world, but they're not going to break. The Titans are, you know, just basically a tile with another cool picture on them. And of course, there's a lot of boards. I mean, in terms of how many they can be. I mean, a player board is like this, double-sided with 2 slightly different maps. And then you got the building board, and then you've got the action row board itself. So there's a decent amount of construction quality in here, you know, plastic components, of wooden hoplites, and of course 2 bags that are big enough to hold the buildings and even the monsters on those bases, as you saw, which is pretty good going. So there's definitely a decent amount of money thrown into this. But all these components come at a price, and it's surprisingly not the price of the game. The game itself is actually reasonably priced. But you are talking about a game here that takes about 45 minutes to 75 minutes to play, depending on whether you play with 2 to 4 players. That's pretty accurate, and it's not a particularly long game, and as we'll get onto soon, it's a pretty simple game. So this is a lightish affair. This game demands a table space though that is bigger than what most households have. It is insane. I mean, if 4 of you are playing, okay, you need to have 4 people with boards big enough for this. This is big. I mean, look at it. You know, box size for scale here. This is a pretty sizable board. Imagine 4 of these around the table, okay, right? For starters. Then you need to have the building board here, which has these little sort of medallion tokens on the edge there, as well as these tokens here, okay? So you need to have that somewhere. You need to have space to lay out these Titan tiles. You need to have space above your board. It's not just the board itself. You need to have space above it to hold the victory point things, because that's how you track how well you're doing. So you need that space. And then you need this board long somewhere with the cards placed on it. It's a little insane. And then you need to have the bags and the tiles like face down in piles nearby and that. And it's, wow. The amount of table space. I've been to board game clubs with this game and actually not brought it out because I know the tables can't fit the game. Even the rule books aren't exactly small, although thankfully they're only big because they're just big size with big font and lots of pictures. The rules to this game is really straightforward. I mean, I had no trouble learning this from the rule book. It's got pictorial representation, everything's laid out pretty easily. There's maybe a little bit of ambiguity with regards to laying tiles and how you get the terrain, the Titan favor. They're a little bit ambiguous, but everything else is easy to read, easy to decipher, and you know, once you're done with it, you know, you have this player turn summary, which annoyingly I would have liked a small card for every player, but if you've got this out, you pretty much have all the rules to the game at your disposal, because most of it is on here, and if you just need it as a memory jogger, it's absolutely perfect. And then flip it over, you've got the iconography as well as what every single building does and what every single creature does for its benefit. But then you have to go through this long upkeep. You have to refresh these buildings, you have to refresh this action row of cards, sliding any down and refreshing them. And then if any of them and then when you get the cards out, you need to populate them with the relevant size terrain token. And if any of them are volcanoes, you need to get them out of the bag and put them on there. It's a little bit of a palaver to set up each round, and you're having quite a lot of rounds in the game. So you get to a point where you almost feel like the round upkeep's taking longer than the turns themselves. Not to a crazy extent, but certainly you're going to want to divide that up amongst the players, because if one person's doing it, they're going to lose the will to live by the end of the game. And so it's kind of weird that the game progresses at a nice, even, smooth pace for your turns. It's like, oh, that was quick, that was quick, that was quick. Hang on, reset. Right. Right, no, this is good. Right, reset. It's kind of like constantly, you're watching a good movie, but you're constantly having to press the pause button every 10 minutes. It's kind of just a little bit annoying, and I wish that it was just a little bit easier to do. That being said, your gameplay turns are still fulfilling, even if they are pretty short. I mean, you've got decent, scope for deciding where you want to put the terrain tiles, and you've got to think, well, I need to put them in a diamond of 4 different terrains if I want to build these for victory points, but then maybe I want a Titan. In which case I need to get, if I want this Titan, I need 3 desert together, I need 3 mountain together. And then if you can construct buildings, well, which building do I go for? They're based on terrain type, but then if you cover up a terrain piece, it no longer counts for building temples or getting Titans. So you've got to think, well, I'm using up that terrain for this building. Do I want the building? Should I build it somewhere else? I don't know. And then even just, whether you go first is a consideration. This goes to the the player who has the most hoplites. So you might be thinking, well, if I can go first in the next turn, then that'll be cool. Yes, the player to your right gets a bonus hoplite as part of this, but because the game ends immediately on 5VP, it's cool when in the late game, you actually consider the fact that you might want to have a big army of units just to get the first player marker so that you can be the first one to hit the 5VP line when somebody else is possibly your rival for it. It's some cool tactical decisions to make, and they're not brain burny. There's not many action cards though. I wish there were a bit more. You literally do only have this many action cards in the game. Now there's only so many actions, so I guess there's not too much variety, but yeah, you do find yourself shuffling through this deck of cards quite often, which is certainly saying something. And replay value is limited because you are basically doing temples, medallions, and Titans, all 3 of them in a kind of mix. You are likely to get 1 Titan as one of your 5 victory points. That's just going to happen, I think, generally. But then you're going to have the thing of deciding whether you're spending gold or building temples. And you're probably going to do a mix of all 3 of these things, so nobody feels that different among all the players. And honestly, I don't see why you even need the players in the game, frankly, because this game is mostly multiplayer solitaire, and that again is a bit of a letdown. When you play this with 2 players, you're done in about 45 minutes, and it goes at a pretty swift pace, and you've got the ability to discard an extra card from the row at the end of the turn. So I find that 2 players is probably the best way to play this, in fact, because you've got tension for the cards, the first player marker means more, and it just goes along at a quicker pace, and it takes up less space on the table. But when you add the 3rd and 4th player, you add no further interaction. The only interaction, there's 2 aspects. One, the choosing of a card. Did you choose the card I want? That is not really player interaction, that's just standard in Euro games. The only other interaction is the Titans. The Titans themselves don't hit other players, but because somebody only has to expand their area of the same terrain in order to nick it off you, this is a victory point that basically bounces around the other players. That's it. Other than that, the fact that the 3rd and 4th player here is doing nothing but elongating the time, and this is a game that really shines more when it is in its 45-minute to an hour mark, but when you've got 4 players, there's a bit of a downtime, and there's certainly a little bit of like, oh, this is getting on to 75 minutes, maybe 90 if you've got slow players. This could be a problem. On top of that, the downtime can be even worse with this first player marker, because let's say player 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So I'm player 1, I have a round 1, 2, 3, 4. We then evaluate where this first player marker goes, and it goes to the player to my left. Yes, I get a bonus hoplite, but that means I've basically had my turn, and then I have to wait 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 turns before it gets back round to mine. Now the game does come with a solo mode, sort of, and this is something I'm not a fan of, and normally I wouldn't even talk about this sort of thing, but the solo mode is not in the box. It's only 2 to 4 players in the box, but there is an official print and play solo mode. And I hate the fact that it's print and play. Seriously, you knew there was going to be a solo mode in this game. Why didn't you put it in the box? Or why didn't you think about it before you sent it off for printing? I hate print and play. You essentially have a solo AI. It goes through the motions. It picks a card based on a die roll, does the action based on some criteria rules like priority, and then gets rid of a card at the end, again based on a die roll. It has a slightly easier time dealing with creatures, and it's mainly just going for the 5 EP just like you are. It's a decent mode. It's not amazing. You have to go through the hassle of print and playing the board and the rules, and then sort of learning it in order to play essentially a 2-player game. I'd rather just play the 2-player game, honestly, but the solo mode is there. But then it exasperates the problem of that round upkeep, because I'm then having to do all the buildings, all the cards, all the terrain pieces, all the creatures. I have to do all that round setup myself. I can take my turn in a matter of seconds, like less than a minute, and I am done with my turn. The AI will probably take half of that time even to do their turn. And then I gotta go through the upkeep. I'm pressing that pause button pretty frequently when I'm playing a solo game, and by the time you get to the end, you're kind of losing the will to live and continue with the game. It's just kind of annoying. That round upkeep takes up a decent chunk of your play time. So Orichalcum is a fine game. It's decent, but I don't think it's quite deserving of some of the really high ratings I've been seeing for this. I've seen some people give very high 8s, very good 9s, you know, 9 out of 10s for this, and I'm like, I don't know, maybe temper your expectations down a little bit, because they don't tend to mention a lot of the things like the table space and the downtime and other aspects like that. So what I'm saying here is that Orichalcum is still a good game. I enjoy the gameplay, I enjoy the choosing of the cards and setting up my little board and trying to go for that race to 5 VP. There's a lot of tension when you've got players on 4 VP, 3-4 VP, and you think, oh, I gotta, come on, I need to go, they're going first, no, don't do it, still got some time, right, do this quick, I'm still not there, come on, one more turn. And that tension is really cool. I love the fact that the rules are dead simple. It's really easy to learn this, although strangely the QR code on here doesn't work. But honestly, you don't need a rules video for this. Don't bother watching one. You can learn this game in a matter of minutes. Don't worry about watching a video because it's unnecessary. This summary aid will do you for every subsequent game you play because it's an excellent memory jogger. And the graphic design on here is pretty straightforward. So again, it's an easy game to get to the table and play, providing you have the table space for it, and that is a bit of a pain, having to sort of go, oh, I can't play this game because there's 4 of us and it's going to take a bit longer and the table's barely big enough to fit all these boards on. It really did need to be scaled down a little bit. But overall, it's relatively short, it's not difficult to learn and teach, it's still good fun to play, but it just has those niggling flaws that stop it being great. And certainly I think the replay value is going to suffer because you don't have many of these action cards, you've only got these 3 ways to score points, and every game is going to play out in a very similar manner, so I do worry about this game's long life. But overall, I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. And I know I've been giving out a lot of 7s lately, but that just seems to be the way the cookie crumbles at the moment. You know, a lot of these games I'm playing are good, but not great. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, please remember, thumb it up on YouTube and on Board Game Geek and get it into the hat review section. Leave your comments down below. You're probably going to do so because of the competition anyway, but even if that's elapsed, then by all means, you know, let me know your thoughts on the video and the game itself and share it on social media. Until next time, you can check out more content on the show, including reviews that I am doing for various Wunderwerk titles, an expansion for Living Forest, and also my top 10 2-player game series that I have done. So take care, and remember, regardless of whether you have a table physically big enough to house this game or not, it's still only a game. So bye for now.